In this mini lecture, we'll be discussing stimulus control, and we'll only be talking about some of the key features of stimulus control. We won't be discussing this part of the chapter in its entirety. You just need to be familiar with the concepts discussed in this mini lecture. When a behavior has been consistently reinforced in the presence of a certain stimulus, that stimulus will begin to affect the probability of the behavior. Like we talked about, I believe it was last week, a descriptive stimulus signals the availability of reinforcement, thereby increasing the probability that the behavior will occur. So a discriminative stimulus predicts that if a behavior is shown in its presence, that behavior will lead to reinforcement. So since in the presence of the discriminative stimulus, the behavior leads to reinforcement, that behavior is more likely to be shown in the presence of that stimulus. So when you see the neon sign lit up outside of Krispy Kreme, indicating that they're hot donuts, you know that the behavior of going into Krispy Kreme will result in the reinforcement of getting hot donuts. And so because you know if you go into Krispy Kreme when that sign is lit up, you get the hot donuts, you're more likely to show the behavior of going into Krispy Kreme in the presence of that sign. If you see a friend smiling at you, and you know that if you speak to that friend while they're smiling, you're likely to be treated kindly by that friend, that'll be your reinforcer, you're more likely to show the behavior of speaking to that friend when they're smiling. So the smile serves as a discriminative stimulus, letting you know that the behavior of speaking to that person will lead to the reinforcement of them being kind to you. Behavior is said to be under stimulus control when the presence of a discriminative stimulus reliably affects the likelihood of a behavior. So when the discriminative stimulus reliably predicts the presence of that behavior is said to be under stimulus control because the stimulus predicts the occurrence of the behavior. Now, we discussed stimulus generalization with classical conditioning, but this term also is relevant to operant conditioning. So in terms of operant conditioning, stimulus generalization refers to the tendency for an operant response to be emitted in the presence of a stimulus that is similar to the discriminative stimulus. Going back to our Krispy Kreme example, you may show the behavior going into Krispy Kreme when you see the neon hot donut sign lit up. You may also show the behavior of going into Krispy Kreme when there is a neon open sign that is lit up. So the hot donut sign would be your discriminative stimulus, and because the neon open sign is similar to that stimulus, you may also show the behavior of going into Krispy Kreme when you see that neon open sign. If your friend smiling serves as a discriminative stimulus that predicts the behavior of you speaking to them, you may also speak to them when you see that friend laughing, because a laugh is similar to the smile. You've learned that the smile predicts that if you show the behavior of speaking to them, they'll be kind to you. You may generalize that same response of speaking to them to when they're laughing. You may predict that if you speak to them while they're laughing, you'll also get the reinforcement. So your behavior speaking to them has generalized to other stimuli that are similar to the discriminative stimulus of them smiling. Behavior can show stimulus discrimination. And this is the tendency for an operant response to be emitted more in the presence of one stimulus than another. So just like with classical conditioning, your behavior can discriminate between one stimulus and another. So if you only show the behavior of going into Krispy Kreme when the hot donut sign is lit up, not when the open sign is lit up, your behavior is showing stimulus discrimination. You respond more to the hot donut sign than you do to the open sign. If you approach your friend and speak to your friend only when the friend is smiling and not when the friend is laughing, your behavior is showing stimulus discrimination. The laugh being the smile being your discriminative stimulus that leads to the behavior of saying hello, speaking to that person, and behavior of laughing or the stimulus of laughing does not predict that you will speak to that person. So your behavior is discriminating between those two stimuli. Now, if a behavior has generalized, meaning that behavior is being shown in the presence of a discriminative stimulus and other stimuli that are similar to that discriminative stimulus. You want the person to discriminate their behavior. You only want them to show that behavior in the presence of the discriminative stimulus and not in the presence of other similar stimuli. Then you can use discrimination training. This involves the reinforcement of responding in the presence of one stimulus, the discriminative stimulus, and not in the presence of other stimuli. So you show the discriminative stimulus, the person shows the behavior, reinforce that behavior. When another similar stimuli is shown and the person exhibits the behavior, you do not reinforce the behavior. So you're teaching them to discriminate between the two similar stimuli. So one stimulus, the stimulus that leads to reinforcement, becomes the discriminative stimulus. The other stimulus becomes a discriminative stimulus for extinction. So that stimulus predicts that if you show the behavior, you will not get reinforced. So you have the person to discriminate between those two stimuli. So, for example, if you were to reinforce somebody when they speak to you when you're smiling, that becomes the discriminative stimulus. You don't reinforce them when they speak to you when you're laughing. That will become the discriminative stimulus for extinction. And you really can use this to train people, when to show certain behaviors. So, for example, you may train your child, if I'm not busy, I'm just sitting around, you ask me for something, you'll be reinforced by me saying yes to your request. If you ask me for something when I'm watching TV, or you ask me for something when I'm studying, or you ask me for something when I'm cleaning up, then you will not get the reinforcement of me saying yes to your request. So by using that, you can train your child. If you want something from me, ask me when I'm not busy, because if you ask me when I'm busy with these other tasks, I will not give you the reinforcement that you're seeking. That will be an example of discrimination training. And so the concept of stimulus control has some major implications for behavior management. So we said that when a behavior is under stimulus control, a stimulus predicts the probability that that behavior will occur in its presence. You can use that to your benefit by using stimuli to bring about particular behavior. So if you know that you need to study, you can surround yourself with stimuli or things that cue the behavior of studying. That could be being in the library, being surrounded by books, being at your laptop. So those could serve as discriminative stimuli that are likely to bring about the behavior of studying. By the same token, you may know that stimuli such as being in your dorm room and being around friends and playing music, these are stimuli that are not likely to bring about the behavior of studying. So you know that if you want to study, you need to surround yourself with the cues or the discriminative stimuli that bring about the behavior of studying, not these other stimuli that will predict other behaviors. So you can control your environment to control your behavior. Place yourself in the presence of stimuli that are likely to bring about the behavior that you want to see. You often see this idea applied to the idea of improving the quality of your sleep. If you have problems with insomnia, you have problems falling asleep when you get in your bed, and you look up tips for improving that, you'll see things like use your bed only for sleep. You don't want to use your bed, your phone, or watch TV, or read a book. Your bed will become associated with all those other behaviors. You want your bed to be only associated with the behavior of sleep. That way, getting in your bed will behavior of sleep. As opposed to if you use it for all these different activities, being in your bed will cue the behaviors of looking at your phone, reading a book, watching TV. You also see tips like if you get in your bed and you don't fall asleep within the first 10 minutes, get out of your bed, do something else, and don't get back in the bed until you're very sleepy and you're likely to fall asleep quickly. If you get used to lying in your bed, laying there awake and not falling asleep, your bed will become associated or will cue the behaviors of staying awake. You want to wait until you're very tired, you're likely to fall asleep, get in your bed, and then your bed will become associated and will cue the behavior of falling asleep. So stimulus control is something you can easily manipulate to bring about the behaviors that you'd like to see.